Oh, give you some context. My mother-in-law is the type of person who loves to show off even the smallest of accomplishments as if she's some local celebrity. Though her own lifestyle lacks any real sophistication, she goes out of her way to pretend otherwise, always eager to be seen as the center of attention. A perfect example of her over-the-top behavior is her monthly club party. Now, there's no actual club, she just gathers her friends and coworkers for an evening get-together. Since they all work in tech, she refers to them as her fellow iGeeks, which, honestly, makes the whole thing even more absurd. These parties have been a regular occurrence for a while now, and they're little more than self-congratulatory bragfests. Naturally, when she found out that my grandfather was generously funding a destination wedding for me, including a 6-day stay package, she couldn't wait to announce it at one of her little gatherings. I had talked about my dream wedding with my grandfather many times, and this was his beautiful way of making that dream come true. Given the limited budget and size of the venue, my fiancé and I carefully crafted the guest list. We agreed that it should be made up of people we were close to and regularly interacted with. I managed to include 22 loved ones from my side, and he listed 18 from his. We were just about to send out the invitations when, one night around 9 p.m., my mother-in-law showed up at our house, uninvited. From the moment she walked in, I felt on edge. She came in with one purpose: to demand changes to the guest list. I was baffled by her sense of entitlement. This was my wedding, after all. To my disappointment, my fiancé took her side. She explained that she had already promised invitations to a few of her colleagues from her iGeeks group. I calmly told her that there simply wasn't any room left on the list. Every person invited had a meaningful connection to us. I looked to my fiancé for support, but he avoided eye contact and continued to back her. Trying to be diplomatic, I showed her the list and explained how thoughtfully it had been made. She glanced over it and casually suggested I remove my cousin's sister, someone I'd lived with for 5 years post-college, claiming that since she'd recently moved to Birmingham, it would be inconvenient for her to travel to the States. That was the last straw. I turned to my fiancé, hoping he'd step in, but again, he sided with her. He argued that since his mother had already talked up the wedding to her colleagues, it would be embarrassing not to invite them. I felt like I was losing the plot. How was I supposed to reason with people who clearly had no regard for what this wedding meant to me? Unable to hold back my frustration, I stormed out. The next morning, I woke up with a new mindset. If they could be so inconsiderate about something as important as my wedding, just to keep up appearances, then I could be equally firm in drawing boundaries. I called my grandfather and told him everything that had happened. I explained that I didn't want to keep justifying myself to people who clearly didn't care about my wishes. Then, I made a bold decision. I told him I was removing him, my grandmother, and my uncle's family from the guest list. I also asked him to cancel his gift. There would be no destination wedding. Thankfully, he understood and supported me completely, without bitterness. When I sent the updated guest list to my mother-in-law and fiancé, they were stunned. I calmly explained that removing those guests meant losing the venue and the package that had been part of my grandfather's gift. I pointed out that now they would have to find a new venue within 2 months, or delay the wedding entirely. Plus, there would be costs for reprinting invites and arranging alternative accommodations for out-of-town guests. I wanted them to fully understand, none of this chaos would have happened if they'd respected the person who made the wedding possible in the first place. I didn't expect them to apologize, but surprisingly, my mother-in-law returned, full of remorse. She pleaded with me to call my grandfather and ask him not to cancel anything. She admitted she'd pressured me unfairly, but I couldn't help questioning the timing of her regret. Now that her colleagues were expecting a fancy destination wedding, the reality of losing that image hit her hard. She even said, bluntly, that a non-destination wedding would be too ordinary and wouldn't impress anyone. That comment said everything. My fiancé, to his credit, finally admitted he was wrong to side with her, but I wasn't ready to let it go. I told him that I shouldn't have to take drastic steps to receive his support, especially over something so basic. Though he apologized again, I stood firm. My decision was final. Even if I changed my mind and invited my grandfather back, his generous gift was already off the table. Was I being too harsh? Maybe, but was I standing up for myself? Absolutely. I came to understand that, ultimately, the wedding was mine, and I needed to focus on what truly mattered to me. Still, I couldn't shake a lingering sense of pettiness for not reversing my decision to exclude my grandfather's generous gift. Did that make me a bad person? But just as I began to find some peace, my mother-in-law wasn't done stirring the pot. As I mentioned earlier, I had no plans to ask my grandfather to reinstate his offer. This clearly upset her. She started calling my fiancé every other day, painting me as ungrateful and vindictive. Yes, I'll admit, some of my actions gave me a sense of vindication, but her accusations were deeply unfair. After all, it was her meddling that forced me into that position in the first place. Then she took it a step further. She began warning my fiancé to reconsider his life choices. She suggested that what I'd done was just a taste of what married life with me would look like. One day, while he was on a call with her on speakerphone, I overheard every word. It stung, but at least I finally got a glimpse of the kind of things she'd been saying behind my back. To his credit, my fiancé told her she had crossed a line, but beyond that, he didn't firmly confront her. I get it, it's his mother, and I would never ask him to sever that relationship. Still, if this kind of interference continues, I know I'll hit my limit. I can't spend my life constantly having to defend myself in my own marriage. Later that week, I had a heartfelt chat with my grandfather. I shared the update about our new wedding venue. While it wasn't the dream destination I had always imagined, it was still beautiful in its own right, and it made me happy. I told him he was invited again, and his warm laughter on the phone reminded me why I cherish him so deeply. His support has always been unwavering. Eventually, I sat down with my husband and addressed the growing tension with his mother. We talked about how her involvement had created real hurt. To my relief, he promised to draw clearer boundaries and help her understand her place in our lives. I hoped it would be the beginning of a calmer path forward. When the wedding day finally arrived, I was filled with joy. Despite everything, it turned out beautifully. I couldn't help but smile when I saw my mother-in-law sulking in a corner, surrounded by her work friends, guests she had pushed so hard to include. I said nothing. The irony was satisfying enough. In an unexpected twist, my grandfather surprised us with a house as a wedding gift, a joint gesture from him and my uncles. It was beyond generous, more than the house itself. What moved me was the feeling of being truly seen and supported by the people who love me. So, here I am, married, happy, grateful. To those of you who followed my journey, thank you. Weddings have a strange way of bringing out both the best and worst in people, and sometimes, the people who cause the most stress aren't strangers, they're family. It's infuriating how some believe they're entitled to dictate how someone else gets married. It was about time my mother-in-law learned that her influence ends where my life begins. If she wants to host a grand event, she's free to plan one of her own. That said, some advice to anyone in a similar situation: don't ignore the red flags. My husband is a good man, but his blind loyalty to his mother almost unraveled everything. If you're not careful, these dynamics can set the tone for your entire marriage. On a separate, personal note, I currently live in Queensland, while my family is based in New South Wales. Recently, my parents and my 27-year-old sister decided to invite themselves over for a week-long holiday after their cruise was unexpectedly cancelled. Normally, I wouldn't mind a visit, but I'm pregnant. I'm already caring for a very active 2-year-old, and our house is not exactly set up to host long-term guests. We have one spare queen bed, which my parents took. My sister made herself comfortable on the couch. She could have shared my bed with me. My husband was away for work, but she snores so loudly it's impossible to get a good night's sleep. Even after repeated nudges, she wouldn't roll over. Then came the real kicker. At dinner on the second night, my dad casually mentioned that they'd invited my sister's boyfriend, who she's been seeing for just 5 weeks, to fly in for the weekend. The flight was already booked, and he'd be arriving Friday morning at 9 a.m. No one had asked me. I'd never even met this guy, and yet they thought it was acceptable to spring this on me. A pregnant woman managing a toddler and a full house. I was beyond frustrated. Somehow, despite everything I've already endured this year, the message still hasn't gotten through. Respecting someone's space and boundaries should never be optional. I didn't have the space to comfortably accommodate my sister's boyfriend. He would have had to sleep on the couch, and my sister would either share that cramped space or my bed with him. The idea of a stranger staying overnight while my 2-year-old son slept in the next room made me extremely uneasy. Frustrated, I called my husband. Together, we agreed to firmly decline the arrangement. Inviting someone into our home without consulting us first was completely inappropriate. When I called my sister, while still at work, to communicate our decision, my mother erupted. She scolded me, questioned my judgment, and insisted they wouldn't invite someone into our home who wasn't trustworthy, even though they had met him fewer than 10 times. Soon after, they hung up, packed their things, and left in a rush. Later, I received a text accusing my husband of manipulating me and claiming they left not because they were wrong, but because I was a poor host. They said I'd changed since being with my husband, even though we've been together for a decade. 3 days later, they called as if nothing had happened. Their inability to understand my reaction left me stunned. Am I overreacting? I don't think so. I was acting as a responsible parent, not being unreasonable. I didn't invite them, they invited themselves. And then they took it a step further by inviting a stranger into my home without my consent. Their entitlement is astonishing. It's as if they resent that I've grown up and started making my own decisions. But this moment clarified everything. It's time for boundaries. I told them plainly, I wasn't being a bad host because I never agreed to host them. I rearranged my routine to accommodate them, but adding a fourth, uninvited guest was unacceptable. Their dramatic exit and personal attacks only proved my point. Going forward, there will be new rules. I won't be playing host to people who show up uninvited and behave disrespectfully. I'm limiting contact until I feel ready to engage again. They crossed a serious line. They didn't ask, they told me someone else would be staying. The fact that they mentioned I seemed in a good mood shows they knew it wasn't right and hoped to manipulate the situation. But I'm standing firm, for myself and my child's safety. I know I'm not in the wrong. I'm 33, 5 months pregnant, and working full-time while my husband is away on business. This is my first pregnancy. When we first met, my husband was severely underweight due to his mother's restrictive cooking, no spices, herbs, salt, or sugar. He grew up on bland food. When he tried my cooking, it opened up a new world of flavor. One Wednesday, I had a craving and made a big batch of curry. Normally, I rely on frozen meals, but this time I made something fresh and left extra in the fridge. That afternoon, my in-laws stopped by unannounced. They have a spare key for emergencies. When I got home, my curry was gone. My mother-in-law had thrown it out, saying it tasted spoiled, and left one of her own dishes in its place. Pregnant and unable to stomach her food, I quietly gave it to a homeless person. Unfortunately, someone saw and told my in-laws. Suddenly, I was flooded with angry messages. Even my father-in-law chimed in. My mother-in-law was livid. Thankfully, my husband fully supported me, but I still wondered if I had overreacted. Honestly, I didn't. They entered my home without permission and discarded my food. That's not just disrespectful, it's a violation of trust. This isn't just about curry, it's about control, boundaries, and the lack of respect for my autonomy. It's time to set firm limits, before the baby arrives. Consider changing the locks and adding security cameras. Your home should be your sanctuary. You deserve safety, peace, and respect.